Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when God places something deep inside your heart and your first instinct is to tell everybody about it. You want people to celebrate with you, support you, and confirm what you feel. But sometimes the quickest way to weaken a blessing is to expose it too early. Not every season needs an audience. Some things are sacred between you and God. Some things are still developing, still growing, still becoming what God intended them to be. And when something is still fragile, too many voices can damage it before it ever becomes strong. A lot of people lose their peace because they keep inviting unnecessary opinions into places where only God's voice belongs. The moment they receive a dream, they announce it. The moment they start healing, they explain it. The moment God gives them direction, they seek approval from everybody around them. But everybody cannot carry the weight of what God showed you. Some people will misunderstand it because they only see your current condition and not your future calling. Others will discourage you because your faith exposes their fear. And some people simply do not have the spiritual maturity to protect what God is growing inside of you. That is why wisdom sometimes looks like silence. Silence is not hiding because you are ashamed. Silence is protection. When a seed is planted in the ground, it is hidden for a reason. If you keep digging it up every day to show people where it is planted, it will never take root. In the same way, God often develops purpose in private before he reveals it in public. The hidden season is not punishment. It is preparation. It is where God builds endurance, humility, patience, and dependence on him. Too many people are exhausted because they are trying to manage everybody's opinions while also trying to obey God. One person tells them they are dreaming too big. Another tells them they are moving too slowly. Another says they are not qualified. Another questions whether God really spoke to them. Eventually, their confidence starts to break because they allowed outside voices to become louder than God's direction. But when God is shaping your life, you cannot let the crowd decide your future. There are seasons where God intentionally separates you from noise because he wants your attention. Sometimes he removes distractions, relationships, and constant approval because he knows those things can become substitutes for trust. If everybody keeps clapping for you, you may start depending on applause instead of depending on God. But when God leads you into quiet places, you begin to learn how to trust him without validation. You learn how to keep moving even when nobody understands. You learn how to obey even when nobody notices. Some battles are won in silence. Not every attack deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding needs an explanation. There are people who spend so much time defending themselves that they lose focus on what God actually called them to do. Meanwhile, God is saying, be still. I will handle what you cannot control. Sometimes silence is the greatest act of faith because it says, God, I trust you enough to fight this battle for me. There is also power in protecting your peace. The world encourages constant exposure. People feel pressure to share every emotion, every plan, every struggle, and every victory. But spiritual maturity teaches you discernment. Everybody around you does not need access to every detail of your life. Privacy is not weakness. Boundaries are not selfish. Wisdom knows when to speak and when to stay quiet. And while you are in that quiet season, God is still working. Even if nobody sees progress, heaven sees it. God is arranging opportunities, strengthening your spirit, healing wounds, and preparing doors that no person can shut. The silence does not mean God stopped moving. It means he is building something deeper than attention. When the right time comes, what God has prepared in private will become visible in public without you forcing it. Most of the important things God does in a person's life happen quietly. Real growth is often invisible at first. People usually celebrate what they can see, but God focuses on what is happening underneath the surface. Just like roots grow deep underground before a tree becomes strong above the ground, spiritual growth happens in silence before it becomes visible in a person's life. And many people become discouraged because they mistake silence for failure. They think that if nothing dramatic is happening, then God must not be working. But some of the greatest transformations happen in hidden seasons. We live in a world that celebrates noise. Everybody wants instant results, public recognition, and visible success. People want growth to happen fast and be noticed immediately. But God's process is different. God is never in a hurry because he cares more about building a strong foundation than creating temporary excitement. A tree with weak roots cannot survive storms. In the same way, a person without deep spiritual roots cannot survive pressure, disappointment, temptation, or delay. So before God raises someone up publicly, he often develops them privately. There are seasons where it feels like nothing is changing. Your prayers seem quiet. Your opportunities seem delayed. Your progress feels slow. You keep showing up, keep trusting, keep believing, but you do not see immediate results. Those are the moments when many people want to quit because they think growth only counts when it is visible. But silence does not mean stagnation. Hidden growth is still growth. Every prayer matters. Every act of obedience matters. Every moment of faithfulness matters, even when nobody else notices it. A seed underground looks lifeless to people standing above the surface. Nobody applauds it while it is buried. Nobody celebrates it while roots are forming in darkness. But the hidden process is necessary because strength is being built before fruit appears. In the same way, God sometimes allows you to go through seasons where nobody sees your tears, your discipline, your sacrifices, or your spiritual battles. While others only see silence, God sees development. He is teaching you patience when things do not happen quickly. He is teaching you trust when answers are delayed. He is teaching you dependence on Him instead of dependence on circumstances. Some people want the platform without the preparation. They want the blessing without the character to sustain it. They want influence without maturity. But God knows that if He gives certain things too early, they could destroy the very person praying for them. That is why hidden seasons are often protective. God uses quiet seasons to shape your heart before He changes your environment. He removes pride. He exposes insecurity. He strengthens integrity. He builds faith that is not dependent on public applause. Growth in silence also teaches humility. When nobody is watching, your relationship with God becomes genuine instead of performative. You learn how to pray without needing attention. You learn how to worship without needing recognition. You learn how to stay faithful even when there is no reward visible yet. That kind of growth produces stability because it is rooted in God and not in people's opinions. The danger is that many people compare their hidden season to somebody else's visible season. They see others succeeding publicly and begin questioning their own progress. But comparison blinds people to the unique process God has for them. Not every tree grows at the same speed. Some roots must go deeper because the calling is heavier. Some people require longer preparation because the responsibility ahead is greater. Delay is not always denial. Sometimes delay is development. Even Jesus spent years in quiet preparation before public ministry. The world only focuses on visible moments, but heaven values hidden faithfulness. What God builds slowly often lasts longer because it is grounded in strength instead of emotion. So when life feels quiet, do not assume God has forgotten you. He may be doing His deepest work in the silence. While you are waiting, roots are growing. While you are trusting, character is forming. While nobody notices, God is preparing you for something greater than you can currently see. One of the greatest distractions in life is the constant need for validation from people. Many people never fully walk in their purpose because they are too busy trying to gain approval from others. They make decisions based on opinions instead of conviction. They adjust their identity to fit expectations. They silence their calling because they are afraid of rejection. But when God has placed a purpose on your life, you cannot allow human approval to become more important than divine direction. The problem with seeking validation from people is that people are inconsistent. One day they celebrate you, and the next day they criticize you. One moment they support your vision, and the next moment they question your ability. If your confidence depends on applause, then criticism will destroy your peace. That is why your identity must be rooted in God and not in public opinion. Because the crowd changes constantly, but God remains faithful. Many people spend years exhausted emotionally and spiritually because they are trying to please everybody around them. They say yes when they should say no. They stay in unhealthy environments because they fear disappointing others. They hide their true thoughts, gifts, and calling because they want acceptance. But no matter how hard you try, you will never satisfy everyone. There will always be somebody who misunderstands you, doubts you, or dislikes the direction God is leading you. If you spend your whole life trying to gain universal approval, you will lose yourself in the process. God never called you to live according to everybody's expectations. He created you with a purpose that is unique to you. And sometimes obedience to God will make other people uncomfortable. When you begin changing, growing, setting boundaries, or walking by faith, not everybody will celebrate it. Some people benefited from the old version of you. Some people were comfortable when you stayed insecure, silent, and dependent on their approval. But growth often requires disappointing people who expected you to remain the same. There are moments when God will call you to step into places that others cannot understand. He may place dreams in your heart that seem impossible to people around you. He may ask you to walk away from environments that others think are safe. He may tell you to trust Him in ways that do not make sense to human logic. And if you constantly wait for everybody's approval before obeying God, you will remain stuck in fear. The danger of validation is that it can quietly become an addiction. Social approval can become something people chase more than truth. Instead of asking, is God pleased with my life? They ask, do people approve of me? That mindset leads to compromise because people begin shaping their choices around acceptance instead of obedience. But peace does not come from pleasing people. Peace comes from knowing you are walking in alignment with God's will. Jesus Himself experienced rejection, misunderstanding, criticism, and betrayal. There were people who doubted Him even while He was performing miracles. If even perfection was criticized, then nobody should expect universal acceptance. Sometimes rejection is confirmation that you are no longer living for the crowd. Sometimes criticism comes because your obedience challenges people who are comfortable staying the same. When you stop seeking validation from people, you begin living with freedom. You no longer feel pressure to explain every decision. You no longer need applause to feel valuable. You no longer allow criticism to define your identity. Instead, you become grounded in the truth that your worth comes from God. That kind of confidence is powerful because it is not controlled by public opinion. There are people who will never understand your assignment because God did not give the assignment to them. Your responsibility is not to convince everybody. Your responsibility is to remain faithful. The opinions around you may become loud, but God's voice must remain louder. When you focus more on pleasing God than pleasing people, you stop wasting energy trying to fit into places where you were never called to belong. And in that freedom, you finally begin walking fully in the purpose God created for your life. Many people believe that strength means always speaking, always defending themselves, and always proving a point. They think silence is weakness because the world teaches that if someone attacks you, you must immediately respond. If someone misunderstands you, you must explain yourself. If someone criticizes you, you must fight back. But spiritual maturity teaches something different. Sometimes silence is not weakness at all. Sometimes silence is trust. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is remain quiet and allow God to handle what they cannot control. There are battles that words cannot fix. There are situations where no explanation will ever satisfy people committed to misunderstanding you. Some people do not ask questions because they genuinely want truth. They ask questions because they want conflict. They criticize because they want a reaction. They provoke because they enjoy distraction. And if you spend your life responding to every opinion, every accusation, and every insult, you will lose focus on what God actually called you to do. One of the enemy's greatest strategies is distraction. If he cannot destroy your purpose, he will try to drain your energy. He will pull you into unnecessary arguments, emotional frustration, and endless explanations. Suddenly, your mind becomes consumed with defending yourself instead of trusting God. But there comes a point where wisdom says, I do not need to fight every battle publicly because God sees the truth even when people refuse to see it. Silence requires trust because it forces you to release control. When people misunderstand you, your natural instinct is to fix their perception immediately. You want to correct every rumor, defend every decision, and protect your reputation. But sometimes God allows misunderstanding because he wants you to learn dependence on him instead of dependence on human approval. Silence says, God, I trust you enough to defend me in your timing. Jesus demonstrated this kind of strength many times. He was falsely accused, mocked, betrayed, and rejected, yet there were moments when he chose silence instead of self-defense. Not because he was powerless, but because he understood that not every attack deserved a response. Real power is not always loud. Sometimes real power is self-control. Sometimes real power is remaining calm when emotions demand reaction. People who constantly react emotionally often lose peace because they allow others to control their emotions. Every criticism ruins their day. Every negative comment steals their focus. Every disagreement becomes a personal battle. But when your trust is rooted in God, you begin to understand that your value is not determined by people's opinions. You stop feeling pressure to win every argument because you know truth does not need constant defense. Silence also protects your spirit. Some conversations carry unnecessary negativity, gossip, anger, and division. Engaging in every conflict can poison your mind and drain your energy. There are moments where the healthiest thing you can do is walk away quietly. Not because you are afraid, but because your peace matters more than proving a point. Every battle is not worth your emotional energy. Every opinion does not deserve access to your attention. Trusting God in silence does not mean becoming passive or weak. It means knowing when to speak and when to let God move. There are times when God will lead you to speak boldly, but there are also times when he will say, be still. Discernment is understanding the difference. Some situations are handled through wisdom, patience, prayer, and restraint rather than emotional reaction. Silence can also deepen your faith because it teaches patience. When you stop trying to control every outcome, you begin learning how to rest in God's sovereignty. You realize that God can open doors no person can shut, and he can expose truth without your constant effort. Trust grows when you stop carrying burdens that only God was meant to carry. There is a peace that comes when you no longer feel responsible for managing everybody's perception of you. You stop obsessing over criticism. You stop replaying arguments in your mind. You stop exhausting yourself trying to make everybody understand your heart. Instead, you focus on remaining faithful, obedient, and grounded in God's truth. And sometimes the loudest statement you can make is silence, because silence declares that your confidence is no longer dependent on winning human approval, but on trusting God completely. One of the hardest things for people to accept is that God can still be working even when nothing appears to be changing. Human nature wants visible evidence. People want immediate answers, instant breakthroughs, and clear signs that everything is improving. But faith often requires trusting God in seasons where you cannot see movement. Just because you do not see progress does not mean God is absent. Just because the situation looks delayed does not mean heaven has stopped working. God is often doing his greatest work behind the scenes. Many people become discouraged because they judge God's activity only by visible results. If doors are not opening quickly, they assume God has forgotten them. If prayers are not answered immediately, they think God is silent. If pain continues longer than expected, they begin questioning his plan. But God's timing is different from human timing. What feels slow to you may actually be perfect preparation in God's hands. There are seasons where everything feels still. You keep praying, but nothing changes overnight. You keep believing, but opportunities do not appear immediately. You keep waiting, but the answers seem delayed. Those are the moments when doubt becomes dangerous because it tempts people to quit before the breakthrough arrives. But faith means believing that God is still moving even when you cannot trace every step he is taking. A farmer does not plant seeds and expect to harvest the next morning. There is a process that happens underground before anything becomes visible above the surface. In the same way, God often works in hidden ways before you ever see public results. While you are waiting, God may be building character, removing wrong connections, preparing opportunities, protecting you from things you cannot see, or arranging circumstances in ways that only he understands. Sometimes the delay itself is protection. People often pray for open doors without realizing they are not ready for what is behind those doors. God sees beyond the present moment. He understands the timing, the pressure, the responsibility, and the challenges connected to your future. What you call delay, God may call preparation. What you call silence, God may call development. The danger is that discouragement can cause people to abandon faith too early. They stop praying because they think nothing is happening. They stop trusting because they expected quicker results. They allow frustration to convince them that their situation will never change. But many breakthroughs happen after long seasons of waiting. Some of the greatest miracles in life occur after moments where everything seemed impossible. Throughout life, God often works in ways people do not expect. Sometimes he closes doors you desperately wanted because he sees danger you cannot see. Sometimes he allows uncomfortable seasons because growth requires stretching. Sometimes he removes people from your life because they cannot go where he is taking you. And while it may not make sense immediately, God's wisdom operates beyond human understanding. Trusting God when you cannot see results requires spiritual maturity. It means believing his promises even when emotions say otherwise. It means continuing to obey even when circumstances remain difficult. It means refusing to let temporary disappointment destroy long-term faith. Faith is not built only in breakthrough seasons. Faith is strengthened in waiting seasons. Many people want God to explain every detail before they trust him. But real trust does not require complete understanding. A child may not understand everything a parent is doing, but trust allows the child to believe they are still being cared for. In the same way, believers are often called to trust God beyond what they can currently see. There are moments when God is arranging things you could never arrange yourself. He is opening conversations you know nothing about. He is aligning people, opportunities, and timing in ways invisible to you. He is strengthening you emotionally and spiritually for responsibilities ahead. Even when life feels uncertain, heaven is not confused. God is never surprised by your circumstances. When people finally look back on certain seasons of life, they often realize God was working the entire time. The waiting season taught endurance. The painful season produced wisdom. The silent season deepened faith. The closed door prevented disaster. What once looked like abandonment eventually revealed itself as protection, preparation, and purpose. Pain has a way of making people believe their story is over. When someone walks through heartbreak, failure, rejection, disappointment, or loss, it can feel impossible to imagine anything good coming from it. In those moments, the struggle feels bigger than the future. The wounds feel permanent. The questions feel endless. But God has a way of transforming painful seasons into powerful testimonies. The very thing that almost destroyed you can become the evidence of God's grace working in your life. Many people try to hide their pain because they think brokenness makes them weak. They carry silent battles, emotional scars, and private disappointments while pretending everything is fine on the outside. But God often uses the places where people were wounded to reveal his strength most clearly. Testimonies are not built from perfect lives. They are built from redeemed pain. They come from people who survived seasons they thought would break them completely. There are moments in life when the pressure feels unbearable. You pray, but the pain remains. You trust, but the struggle continues. You wonder why God allowed certain things to happen. Some experiences leave deep emotional marks. Betrayal can damage trust. Failure can damage confidence. Rejection can damage identity. Loss can leave people feeling empty inside. And during those seasons, it is easy to believe the pain has no purpose. But God wastes nothing. Sometimes the hardest battles produce the deepest growth. Pain has a way of exposing what comfort hides. It reveals fears, weaknesses, insecurities, and areas where people truly need God. In suffering, people often discover strength they never knew they had. They learn dependence on God in ways they would never learn during easy seasons. The struggle becomes the place where faith is refined. A testimony is not simply about surviving hardship. It is about transformation. It is about becoming someone stronger, wiser, and deeper through the process. Some people come out of painful seasons bitter, but others come out stronger because they allowed God to shape them instead of destroy them. The same fire that melts wax can strengthen steel. Pain can either harden a heart or deepen a person's faith, depending on how they respond to it. One of the most powerful things about a testimony is that it gives hope to others. People connect with honesty more than perfection. Someone who has overcome addiction can encourage another person trapped in addiction. Someone who survived depression can speak life into another person battling hopelessness. Someone who endured rejection can remind others they are still valuable. The wounds become meaningful because they create connection and understanding. Many people are waiting for a perfect life before they believe God can use them. But God often uses imperfect stories. Some of the strongest voices come from people who experienced deep pain and still chose to trust God. Their testimony carries weight because it is real. It was tested in suffering, not built in comfort. There are things people learn in dark seasons that cannot be learned any other way. Patience is developed through waiting. Endurance is developed through pressure. Compassion is often born from personal suffering. People who have been broken tend to understand broken people differently. They become more compassionate, more patient, and more sensitive to the struggles of others because they remember what pain felt like personally. The enemy often wants people to feel ashamed of their past because shame keeps them silent. But healing begins when people realize that surviving the battle is evidence of God's faithfulness. The scars become reminders that what tried to destroy them did not win. Their story becomes proof that pain does not have the final word. Sometimes the very area where you suffered most becomes the area where God uses you most powerfully. The heartbreak becomes wisdom. The struggle becomes strength. The tears become compassion. The survival becomes ministry to others. What once looked like the end of your story eventually becomes the part that inspires somebody else not to give up. And when people hear what God brought you through, they begin to believe that maybe their situation can change too. Your testimony becomes a reminder that darkness is temporary, healing is possible, and God can still bring purpose out of pain.